George Lindsay, best known as Goober Pyle on The Andy Griffith Show, was beloved for his goofy charm and warm smile. But behind the scenes, things weren't always as friendly as they appeared. Lindsay held on to a grudge for decades toward his co-star Frances Bavier, who played the sweet Aunt Bee. Though they both seemed to fit perfectly into the peaceful world of Mayberry on screen, a real-life moment between them left Lindsay deeply hurt and distant. This conflict revealed an unexpected side to their relationship and raised questions about how one incident could leave such a lasting mark. But to understand what shaped Lindsay's character and reactions, we need to go back to his life before The Andy Griffith Show. George Lindsay was born on December 17, 1928, in Fairfield, Alabama, small town with simple roots. His parents, George Ross Lindsay, a butcher, and Alice Smith, raised him with traditional Southern values. He spent much of his childhood in Jasper, Alabama, living with his grandparents, an experience he credited with teaching him hard work and humility. As a young man, acting wasn't his initial path. Lindsay loved sports, especially football, and became the quarterback for his high school team at Walker County High. After graduating in 1946, he attended Kemper Military School in Missouri, then Florence State Teachers College, where he majored in physical education and biology. Acting came later, after he discovered a passion for performing in college plays. After graduating in 1952, he joined the United States Air Force and was stationed at Ramey Air Force Base in Puerto Rico. His time in the military was formative. It instilled discipline and gave him stories he'd later bring to the stage as a comedian. Once out of the service, Lindsay returned to Alabama and briefly taught at Hazel Green High School. But the pull of a larger dream led him to New York City. He set his sights on the American theater wing, and by 1956, he was accepted. New York brought both opportunity and struggle. He took any role he could get, working his way up in the industry. In 1960, he even appeared on To Tell the Truth, a television quiz show. As a nightclub comic who loved spearfishing, a quirky but charming showcase of his humor and personality. After completing his studies with the American Theater Wing, Lindsay began landing roles in Broadway productions like Wonderful Town. It was the start of a career that would make him a household name. Lindsay appeared in Broadway productions like Wonderful Town and All-American. But his big break was still just out of reach. In 1962, he decided to take a chance and moved to Los Angeles. Aiming to make a name for himself in Hollywood, began landing small roles on popular television shows like Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, and even The Twilight Zone. Bit by bit, Lindsay was proving he had staying power in the entertainment industry. Then in 1964, everything changed. He was cast as Goober Pyle on The Andy Griffith Show. Let's take a closer look at the surprising tension that developed between George Lindsay, who played the lovable mechanic Goober, and Frances Bavier, better known as the warm-hearted Aunt Bee. On the surface, the fictional town of Mayberry seemed like a place where everyone got along. But behind the scenes, the environment wasn't always as harmonious. George joined the cast in 1964, stepping into the role of Goober Pyle, a quirky, kind-hearted mechanic and cousin to Gomer Pyle, played by Jim Nabors. Lindsay brought Goober to life with his silly expressions, easygoing charm, and a famously awkward Cary Grant impression that quickly won over audiences. While Goober was carefree and fun on screen, the atmosphere backstage wasn't always the same. Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, was beloved by fans for her sweet maternal character. But in real life, those who worked with her said she was quite different, more private, reserved, and very serious about her work. According to various cast members, including Lindsay himself, Frances often kept her distance from others on set and didn't engage much in the joking and camaraderie that the rest of the cast enjoyed. Her strict sense of professionalism sometimes clashed with Lindsay's more relaxed, playful style. In his 1995 memoir, Goober in a Nutshell, George shared his perspective on their working relationship, explained that Frances approached her role with great seriousness, and sometimes found it difficult to connect with the more laid-back energy of the set. Lindsay, known for lightening the mood with jokes, playful banter, and the occasional bit of colorful language. Often found himself at odds with Bavier's preference for a more reserved and respectful environment. One particular incident on the spin-off show Mayberry RFD marked a turning point. The episode titled The Racehorse featured Aunt Bee in a central role. Lindsay, in his usual lighthearted manner, was joking around on set, as he often did to pass the time. But this time, something shifted. Frances, clearly irritated, didn't just express her disapproval with a stern glance or quiet word. She confronted Lindsay directly. What happened next shocked everyone present. She physically struck him. Though it wasn't a serious injury, it left a lasting impression. Lindsay later described feeling deeply hurt not just by the act itself, but by what it symbolized, a complete breakdown in their already strained relationship. The moment became a wedge that never fully healed. While Lindsay continued to speak respectfully of her dedication to the craft, he acknowledged that the emotional distance between them never closed after that confrontation. According to Lindsay, umbrella incident wasn't just a single tap. It happened twice with enough force that the umbrella actually bent. The moment shocked everyone on set, especially Lindsay, who felt humiliated and deeply upset. This wasn't just a passing frustration, it left a lasting impact on him. In his memoir, he wrote about the embarrassment of being publicly struck, especially since so many witnesses saw what happened. He never expected Frances to take things that far, and the incident created a rift between them that, according to Lindsay, never fully healed. Ken Berry, played Sam Jones on the show, also expressed how upset he was about the situation. He felt that Frances's reaction was way out of line, and that George hadn't done anything to deserve such harsh treatment. Before this incident, Lindsay respected Frances as an actress and didn't dislike her. But after that day, he admitted that he never fully forgave her for how she treated him. This wasn't the only challenge Frances posed on set. Other cast and crew members shared stories of struggling to work with her. For example, Howard Morris, who played Ernest T. Bass and directed some episodes, described working with Frances as like stepping on a landmine. He had to be very careful when giving her directions because even small requests like moving a few steps could upset her and cause tension on set. Sheldon Leonard, the executive producer, also found Frances to be the most difficult cast member to work with. Despite recognizing her talent, what made Frances even more complicated was her own awareness of the contrast between herself and her character, Aunt Bee. She knew that Aunt Bee was loved by audiences, but she also admitted that she was quite different from the sweet motherly figure she played. In a 1966 article, Frances said that Aunt Bee was so much nicer than she was, openly acknowledging the differences between the woman and the role. This internal conflict was something she struggled with, and it likely contributed to her keeping her distance from the rest of the cast. Later in life, Frances revealed that the emotional strain of playing Aunt Bee had become so difficult that she eventually sought help from a psychiatrist. As the years went on, Frances's behavior continued to keep her apart from her co-stars. When Mayberry RFD began its third season, she was no longer part of the show. The on-screen explanation was minimal. Sam Goober and Howard simply mentioned that Aunt Bee had gone to visit her sister and wouldn't be back soon. But behind the scenes, it seemed that her tense relationships with the cast, especially with Lindsay, played a role in her departure. Though the show continued without Aunt Bee, her absence was deeply felt by fans who had grown attached to her character. Even after the show ended, Frances kept her distance from her former co-stars. In 1986, when Andy Griffith and Ron Howard, who played Little Opie, decided to surprise her with a visit, she refused to see them. She told them it was because she hadn't been notified of their visit. But many believed there was more to it, that she wanted to keep her life as Aunt Bee separate from her real life. However, toward the end of her life, Frances made one last gesture of reconciliation. She called Andy Griffith and expressed regret for being difficult to work with during the show, apologizing for her behavior. This gave Griffith some closure. Unfortunately, George Lindsay never received a similar apology. If he had, it surely would have been included in his memoir. For Lindsay, the unresolved tension lingered long after the show ended. He held on to the memory of that umbrella incident and Frances's reaction, feeling it was unfair and unnecessary. Even though the Andy Griffith Show brought him fame and a devoted fan base, that painful moment stayed with him for years. That umbrella incident overshadowed much of the good memories Lindsay had of working on set. Fans adored him for his character and his warm personality, but behind the scenes, he carried the weight of that one unexpected moment with Frances Bavier. But here's a surprising twist in George Lindsay's story that might just blow your mind. He was reportedly considered for the role of Spock on Star Trek. Yes, Goober Pyle, the funny, simple mechanic from Mayberry, could have been the logical, serious Vulcan officer on the Starship Enterprise. This surprising bit of trivia came to light during an interview segment on TV, Land's 4th anniversary Star Trek marathon in 2006. Leonard Nimoy, who famously played Spock, mentioned that Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, had considered George Lindsay for the role. At first, some wondered if Nimoy was joking, but there's more to support the claim. Ernest Borgnine, star of Mikhail's Navy, wrote in his autobiography Ernie that Lindsay himself told him he'd turned down the part. Borgnine's exact words were, "My hand to God." He turned down the part of Mr. Spock on TV's Star Trek. Imagine that George Lindsay, with his trademark goober smile and Alabama drawl, playing the ultra-serious Spock. It almost feels impossible to picture, right? But in a way it makes sense. Before Lindsay found fame as Goober, his life was full of unexpected twists. He was a college quarterback, a high school teacher, and even taught science for a time. So seeing him in a role where he could draw on his real-life teaching and scientific background isn't too far-fetched. If you're wondering how this casting idea even came about, it's interesting to note that the Andy Griffith Show and Star Trek shared more than just popularity. They also shared a filming lot. Both shows were shot at the famous 40 Acres backlot in Culver City, California. You could even spot familiar places like Floyd's Barbershop from Mayberry appearing in Star Trek episodes such as Miriam City on the Edge of Forever. Casting George Lindsay as Spock would have been an entirely different twist for both shows, and for television history, it's funny to think about what might have been with Lindsay's connection to Star Trek. His Goober character was known for lighthearted, goofy comedy, while Spock was famous for his straight face, sharp logic, and emotionless presence. Would audiences have embraced Spock if Lindsay had played him? And maybe you would have added a bit of that southern charm to the role. Imagine Spock doing a goober dance on the bridge of the Enterprise. Maybe not, but the very thought of Lindsay as one of the most iconic sci-fi characters ever is wild. In the end, the role went to Leonard Nimoy, who made Spock the legendary character we all know and love. But for George Lindsay, just being considered showed he was much more than the goofy mechanic from Mayberry. His range surprised even his closest friends and fans. Just imagine if he had chosen differently. We might remember George Lindsay in a completely new way today, even without the role of Spock. George's career was full of memorable moments. After the Andy Griffith Show wrapped up, Lindsay stayed with his character Goober on the spin-off Mayberry RFD. The show kept the small-town charm of the original series, and fans loved seeing familiar faces, including Goober. As they carried on the legacy of Mayberry, Lindsay played Goober until CBS canceled the show in 1971. But even after Mayberry RFD ended, he didn't slow down. He continued appearing on TV, playing a mix of comedic and tough characters. 1972, he appeared as Charlie, a highwayman. In an episode of Gunsmoke called Blind Man's Bluff, took on the role of an escaped convict known as the Dove and the Rifleman. These roles proved that Lindsay had more range than many expected, showing he could bring grit and depth when needed. Disney also recognized something special in George Lindsay. He lent his voice to several beloved animated movies. If you listen closely, you can catch his voice as Lafayette the dog in the Aristocats. He also voiced Trigger, one of the Vulture henchmen in Robin Hood, and appeared as one of the swamp mice in The Rescuers. Kids and families who enjoyed these classics might not have realized that Goober was right there in their favorite movies, bringing laughter in his own unique way. One of Lindsay's longest-running roles was on Hee Haw, show that perfectly matched his roots and sense of humor. From 1972 to 1992, George played Goober again, but this time, character was a bit wiser, a little more country. and fit right in with the barnyard jokes and musical performances. Hee Haw kept George in the spotlight for 20 years, connecting him with new fans as well as those who remembered him from Mayberry. Outside of acting, George had a full personal life. He married Joanne Herbert, and they had 2 children, George Jr. and Camden Joe Lindsay Garter, plus 2 grandsons. Although his marriage ended in divorce, George found companionship later in life with Nashville businesswoman Ann Wilson, who stayed by his side until he passed away. George Lindsay died on May 6, 2012. From heart failure at the age of 83 in Nashville, Tennessee. He was laid to rest with the quiet dignity that marked much of his life, a beloved actor who left a lasting impression on television and CI in the hearts of fans. George Lindsay was laid to rest at Oak Hill Cemetery in Jasper, Alabama, the very town where his journey began. Beyond acting, George's heart was deeply committed to giving back. Over 17 years, he raised more than $1 million for the Alabama Special Olympics through his George Lindsay Celebrity Weekend and Golf Tournament in Montgomery. He also helped raise $50,000 for the Alabama Association of Citizens with Disabilities. But Lindsay didn't just fundraise, he actively participated, even serving as head coach for the Winter Games during the Minneapolis Special Olympics national competition. His dedication showed how much he truly cared about helping others, especially children with special needs. Education was equally important to him. Established the George Lindsay Academic Scholarships at the University of North Alabama, where he once studied. In recognition of his contributions and strong ties to the school, the university awarded him an honorary doctorate in 1992. His hometown of Jasper honored him by naming a highway after him, a lasting testament to how much he was loved and respected in Alabama. Throughout his life, George earned many accolades. In 1995, he received the Governor's Achievement Award from the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. 2 years later, in 1997, he was honored with the Minnie Pearl Lifetime Achievement Award, especially meaningful because it came from a fellow country entertainment legend. Then, in 2007, received the first ever Icon Award from the Nashville Association of Talent Directors. On top of all this, George founded the George Lindsay YAA Film Festival at the University of North Alabama in 1998, a tradition that continues to celebrate filmmakers every year. While most remember George Lindsay as the silly, lovable goober, his life was far richer than any one role. From almost playing Spock in Star Trek II, lending his voice to beloved Disney films, and dedicating himself to tireless charity work, George lived a life full of unexpected twists and heartfelt contributions. He is remembered not only for the laughter he brought to millions, but for the kindness he spread along the way.